Parshas Tetzaveh. Tetzaveh means to command. V'ata Tetzaveh es b'nei Yisrael vikhu elecha shemen zayis zach chasis lamaor la'elois ner tamid. Fancy words there, ner tamid. We know what a ner tamid is. It's in a shul today. It's an eternal light. So every shul has got a light above the Aharon Kodesh to remind us of this ner tamid, this light that's always lit. The Parsha starts off by telling us, last week's Parsha told us all about the Mishkan, the sanctuary, and almost all the utensils in the Mishkan. This week's Parsha starts and says, we had a menorah last week. Hashem says, command the children of Israel to take pure olive oil, clear olive oil, crushed for illumination is the way it's translated here, to kindle the menorah continually, ner tamid. This crushed olive oil was the first drop of clear oil that came out of an olive. Olive oil can be cleared. You can filter it. So you can crush your olives and filter it. This initial shemen zayis zach was the first drop. It was absolutely pure olive oil. That's what was used for menorah. The rest of the olive was crushed, and they used that oil in other parts of the service in the temple. So it would be used generally for a mincha offering, for a meal offering. They brought offerings of flour. They used oil with those offerings. But the drop of olive oil was used for illuminating the menorah. And the menorah was lit every day, but the one light was always a light. The western light was always lit. They obviously cleaned it out and others were lit, but during that, after the cleaning process, light was lit effectively 24/7. Hence, we have a ner tamid in our shul today to remind us of that. The Torah says you should arrange it from evening till morning before Hashem, an eternal decree for all your generations from the children of Israel. That's the eternal decree. So we have a reminder all the time in shul. You'll see a ner tamid. That's there to remind us that we have a menorah in the temple. A lot of the building of our shul, the structure of our shuls, is similar to the temple. We have a table where we read the Torah on. That's a shulchan. We have an Aharon where we keep the Torah in. It's similar to the Aharon Kodesh, the actual Aharon in the temple, in the Mishkan. The shul is set up to remind us of what we have in the Mishkan. We're not allowed to replicate the Beis HaMikdash exactly, but we have various symbols to remind us, that's what we're praying for. We're going to shul. Most of our prayers are about, if you look at the Shemona Esrei, at least a third of the prayers are about redemption, bringing Mashiach, and rebuilding the temple. And so that's our focus. That is our big major focus. And so the Parsha starts with Ata Tetzaveh, command the children of Israel to light oil. I'm going to skip right to the end of the Parsha, and we'll come back to the rest of the Parsha. The very, very end of the Parsha gives us the final implement in the Mishkan. The Aliyah of Shvi, chapter 30, says, Vasisa mizbech miktar ketores, atzeh shitim ta'aseh oisai. Make an altar on which you'll bring the incense, bring it up in smoke, of atzeh shittim, wood. Most of the other implements were made from atzeh shittim. They translate it here as acacia wood. It's some kind of wood that was very special for the Beis HaMikdash and for the Mizbach. Take it, make it from wood. It's 1 amma by 1 amma square, and its height is 2 ammas. An amma is about a half a meter. So it's 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, standing at a meter tall. It's a very small altar, and you burn the incense on that. Morning and evening, the incense is burnt on it, and it's covered with gold. So, and it sits outside the Kodesh Kadoshim, outside the Kodesh. So you've got in the temple, from the most holy part being the Kodesh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies, which is all in last week's Parsha, which has the Aharon in it, with the tablets, with the luchos, with the 2 kruvim on top of it, made of shittim wood, covered gold inside and outside. 3 boxes, gold outside, wood in the middle, and then gold on the inside, and a lid made of pure gold. Inside that were the tablets, both the tablets that we will learn about next week in Parshas Kisisa, that Moshe broke, and then the second luchos that Moshe took up to Shemayim and then brought down later on. Both of those, the broken pieces and the second tablets, are in there, as well as a Sefer Torah. Whether the Sefer Torah was inside or next to it is subject to discussion, as well as Aharon's staff, his stick, and a jar of man. Those were all in or around the Aharon in the Holy of Holies. And certainly in the first temple they were there. In the second temple it's hidden away and still hidden to this day. The next area of sanctity coming back is the Holy, where we've got the menorah and the shulchan from last week's Pasha and this golden mizbach. The three things are there, and those are used every day in the service. The shulchan, the table, once a week the bread is brought in, the lechem hapanim, the showbread, and taken out on a Shabbos and eaten by the Kohanim. The menorah is lit every day. It's cleaned in the day and lit at night. It's from the beginning of this week's Pasha. And then the golden mizbach in the middle part is incense is brought on that in the morning and in the evening. And then outside of that, we have the copper mizbach in the courtyard area and the courtyard surrounding the mizbach. That's the same structure as the temple in Yerushalayim. When it's rebuilt, that's what the temple will essentially look like. The size is different from the Mishkan to the Beis HaMikdash. The Mishkan was pretty small. It was 100 amos, the whole courtyard area by 50 meters by 25 meters. The way I picture it is an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That was the really, and the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim was not that much bigger. It was bigger, but it wasn't significantly bigger, but it was magnificent. Chazal, the rabbis, say that anybody, if you haven't seen the Beis HaMikdash, you haven't seen a beautiful building. So we have magnificent buildings in the world that are nothing, don't even come close to the beauty of the Beis HaMikdash. And that was last week's parasha, describes how the Haftorah describes how King Solomon built the first temple. So we are, by the time we get to the end of this week's parsha, we've basically got all the implements of the Mishkan, as well as the structure of it, the coverings, the walls, the outside courtyard. Everything is ready to go in terms of Moshe has given us the plans. In 2 weeks' time, next week is Kisisa. Moshe is going to receive the tablets, and there's the golden calf story. And the following 2 weeks is the building and the assembly of this strong structure. In between, the rest of this parsha, now the first part of it is only 2 verses about the menorah. The last part is at Shvi, is 10 verses about the incense altar. So we've got 12 verses, but the whole parsha is 101 verses. So we've got 90 odd verses that we've got to fill in between. And those 90 verses are really about the appointment of Kohanim. What are Kohanim? Who are the Kohanim? And essentially, really what the parsha here is talking about is what did the Kohanim wear? And some parts of what their inauguration and the daily service is going to look like. Most of that is found in the book of Leviticus, in Vayikra. Leviticus meaning Levites. And that's really the description of what they did, mostly. This is what they wore. And so the Parsha goes through in a lot of detail the appointment and what the Kohanim wore. So let's go through the garments of the Kohanim. I don't want to focus too much on it. Last year we did, and we showed pictures last year and went through a whole lot of it. I will, show some pictures just to put it in practice. Once we've gone through it, just to put it in our mind, because, pictures, visual learning is, for most people, the best way of learning. I think studies show that 75% of people learn best visually. And so we will show some pictures, drawings of what the Kohanim wore. But essentially, we're told, V'ata hakrev elecha es Aharon achicha, bring Aharon your brother near. Moshe is told this, with his sons from among the children of Israel. The Torah names his sons. It says Aharon, Nadav, and Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar. Aharon had 4 sons. Aharon and his 4 sons and him are made Kohanim. Those were the only Kohanim. If the 4 sons had any children, they were not Kohanim. We'll learn later on that Pinchas, the son of Elazar, became a Kohen. But he was not a Kohen initially, according to most opinions. Nadav and Avihu were not married. They felt that they were, there's various opinions as to why, but they were extremely holy people, and they felt that they did not need to get married, according to many opinions. And in a few weeks' time, we're going to learn that in Pasha Shmini, they brought foreign fire in the inauguration of the Mishkan, and they died on the day the Mishkan was inaugurated. And for various different reasons, we will, please God, discuss that later on. But so after that, we're left with Aaron and his two sons, Elazar and Itamar. And they are the Kohanim. That's the only Kohanim at the time. And the Torah then says, make garments that are garments of sanctity for your brother Aaron, for glory and splendor. L'chavod or l'tiferes. So these are special garments. Each of the garments, and I'm not going to discuss it now, but each of the garments, besides for being magnificent garments of a high priest, they served a purpose. They were there to help people attain atonement for various things. Each of the garments had a role. We might discuss bits of it, but generally I want to just focus more about Kohanim in the world today. That's really what our focus is going to be, please God, in the next few, after we go through just what the garments were. So Torah lists straight out, make these garments. And then it says, these are the garments. Asher yaseh, that you shall make. A choshen, a breastplate, an ephod. We don't translate the word ephod here. We'll come back to that. Ma'il, a robe. Ketones, a tunic. Tashbeitz mitznefes. V'avneit v'asu bigdei kodesh la'aron achicha levanav l'kohenli. Of box-like knit. So that's the tunic that's knitted box-like. It looks like kind of a fancy design of this tunic, of the fabric of it. A turban and a belt. So that's what we're making for Aaron. Make these for Aaron and his sons. They shall be made from what materials are they made? Zahav, gold, techeles, ve'es hagaman, ve'es tola shashani, ve'es hashesh. So make it of gold. Turquoise wool, in other words, techelet is what we're told to put on our tzitzis, the blue turquoise wool. Purple, scarlet wool, and linen. And so those are turquoise, purple, scarlet are the colors of royalty. They've in just about every society, when you see royalty, those are the colors that royalty have in their robe, in their crown, whatever it might be. And so essentially there's an incredible level of sanctity put onto the Kohen Gadol. The regular Kohanim we'll come to just had white garments with a belt, a colored belt. So make the ephod, it says. Make this ephod of gold, turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, twisted linen, done by a weaver. So it's woven. And the ephod was like a reverse apron. It had shoulder straps going back, and it came around. According to different opinions, was how far around it came. But essentially, it was this very colorful, beautiful apron that the Kohen Gadol wore on the outside. It had two shoulder straps and with belts on it, and it goes through all the different things. And then they took stones and put stones onto the shoulder straps with the names of the tribes engraved onto those stones. We'll come back to all of that when I'll show you some pictures, and we'll have a look at what it all was. Then make a breastplate, Choshen Mishpat, a breastplate of judgment. One of the books of the Shulchan Aruch is called Choshen Mishpat after this. In fact, you should put in it 4 rows of stones. They put 12 rows, 3 stones in each row, called Arba Turim. The Arba Turim is the 4 books of the Shulchan Aruch based on the Tur who wrote that. The setup. He established the structure and the chapters and the breakup of the Shulchan Aruch in the Sefer of the Tur, which then the Beis Yosef commented on and then wrote the Shulchan Aruch based on that. So make this breastplate, make it square and fold it in half, and put all these different precious stones on it, all different types of stones. And again, the tribes' names were written on those stones with other things. I will come back to all of this. make this breastplate. It's attached to the shoulder straps of the ephod, and it sits on the chest of the Kohen Gadol. Inside it, they put the Urim V'Tumim. It's not mentioned directly here, but the Urim V'Tumim were special parchment with Hashem's name on it, and through that was the way the Kohen Gadol communicated with Hashem. And with various different stories in Tanakh about it, the Kohen Gadol would be asked a question from the Sanhedrin or from the king, and then he would approach Hashem and ask Hashem for an answer. And through a form of prophecy, the lights, it was the first computer screen, it was beyond AI. The different letters, because all the letters of the Aleph Beis were on the stones, would light up. And that's how they knew what Hashem wanted of us. One of the ways of knowing what Hashem wanted from us. Then he had a robe, a me'il. The robe was made entirely of turquoise wool. And it discusses that its head was folded, the neck of it was folded over and doubled over, and it had a border around the bottom, and on the bottom of the border they had pomegranates and bells. Not real pomegranates, woven pomegranates made of turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool on the hem all around. And it says a bell, pomegranate, all the way around the bottom of the me'il. Then they made for him a tzitz, which is a head plate, a golden plate on his head, which he wore, and it said Kodesh LaHashem, holy to Hashem, on the breastplate. And he had a tunic on top of that. Then we spoke about the tunic, make it of box-night lit, and then had a hat, a turban on his head. That's the Kohen Gadol. Then it says, for the sons of Aharon, you should make tunics and sashes. I left out one part there, but it'll come back to it. And a headdress, and dress Aharon and his sons, and they have a belt, and they have pants. They got short pants with the tunic over it. And so the regular Kohen had 4 garments. He had his pants, his tunic, his belt, and his hat. The Kohen Gadol had 8 garments. Except on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol had just white garments. He didn't have the gold and colorful garments because Yom Kippur came to atone for the golden calf. And because it was gold, they said you don't go into the Holy of Holies. So whenever the Kohen Gadol went in to the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, and he went in several times in the day, he changed into white garments. And the Musaf service we have on Yom Kippur, where we discuss, the Chazan's repetition discusses the avodah, the service of Yom Kippur, goes through all that. Each of the times that he changed, he went to the mikveh, washed his hands and feet, changed his clothes from his gold to his white, got white to gold, etc. Mishnah in Yuma and the Yom Kippur Musaf repetition discusses all of that. Then the Torah goes on. So that's the garments. Then the Torah talks about the initiation, inaugural ritual, what they were to do to sanctify the Kohanim and make them. Moshe had to dress them, and all of this is brought out in the book of Vayikra in Leviticus, in the next book we're going to read. It tells them that Moshe is to dress them, put on their sashes, Aaron and his sons, put their headdresses on them, and then they had a whole service, an offering service that they would bring on that first day. And this is all brought in Parsha Shmini, in Sefer Vayikra, all of this whole inauguration service. It just goes through, and I'm not going to go through now, but what they had to bring, bull, ram, etc., all the different things. They were inaugurated by having blood of these animals put on their right thumb, on their right big toe, and their right earlobe. And that's something that we do for a person who's a Metzora, who's got Saras, when they recover from it, and they're now clear, when they come to temple, we put their sacrifice blood in the same places. There's a lot of significance between those 3 body parts. Various times in Jewish practice that happens in temple times. It doesn't happen today, but those things, right hand, right foot, thumb and big toe, and right ear. And then the Torah talks about the Tamid offering, the daily Tamid offering. It's not where we just learn it in detail, but the Tamid is brought here. We bring 2 sheep, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. We light the incense on the golden Mizbach in the morning and the afternoon. every single day. So it's brought here as part of the inauguration ritual, but it's actually something in Parshas Pinchas where it discusses it in detail, the daily Tamid offering. Tamid meaning we had Ner Tamid at the beginning of the Parsha. Continual offering. It's always there. And in fact, I was talking about Shulchan Aruch before, the Ramah, who was the Ashkenazi rabbi who wrote what we call the mappa, the glosses, the tablecloth. Shulchan Aruch means set table. It was originally written by Rabbi Yosef Karo for Jewish people to learn the whole book every month. It's a revision. It's a short form version of these are the halachas that apply to Jewish people in the world. Learn it every month. The Ramah was writing something very similar, and he heard that Rabbi Yosef Karo had written the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Yosef Karo lived in Tzfat in Israel. The Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, lived in Krakow in Poland. And he heard that the Shulchan Aruch was being written, and he said, well, we can't have two Shulchan Aruchs in the Jewish world. So he destroyed his work. And all he did was wrote glosses, commentaries, or edits, I guess, on the Shulchan Aruch, where Ashkenazi minhagim and practice is different to Sfadim. And so the Shulchan Aruch itself is a very small book. We've got, that's 14 volumes of Shulchan Aruch, because every page has got tons of commentaries on the page. So to go and learn that every month is impossible, but to learn just the Shulchan Aruch, it's a few lines on each page. The rest of it, around it all, is different commentaries. But it's 4 sections. The name of the tour that it's based on comes from the 6th Parsha as well. And the reason I bring all that in is because the Ramah starts with the word Tamid, the beginning and the end. Judaism, we learned in Parshas Mishpatim 2 weeks ago, we said Na'aseh v'nishma, that's 24/7. Judaism is not a religion, it's a 24/7 way of life. It's all about everything.
Isn't it mainly about the laws?
What? The Shulchan Aruch is laws. It's the halachas, the laws that apply to us in our everyday living, in our times. It doesn't discuss things that happen in temple times. There's nothing about sacrifices and all that. Rambam brings that and others bring that, but it's what's relevant in the times before Mashiach comes. And it's 4 sections across different parts of halacha. Okay, then the end of the whole section, just before we get to the last chapter, as I said, chapter 30, about the incense altar, is about the Hashem resting his presence amongst the children of Israel. Right at the end of Shishi, of the 6th Aliyah, it says, V'kitlashta es ohel mo'ed ve'es hamizbach ve'es ha'aron ve'es banav akadesh lakohen li. Hashem says, I will set my meeting place there, talking about in the Mishkan, with the children of Israel. It will be sanctified with my glory. I'll sanctify the tent of meeting and the altar, and Aaron and his sons will be sanctified to minister to me, says Hashem. I'll rest my presence amongst the children of Israel. I will be their God. They shall know that I am Hashem their God, who took them out of the land of Egypt, to rest my presence among them. I am Hashem their God. That there is now the point where we know, okay, Aaron and his sons have been singled out as the Kohanim. That's the point in time where we're told, okay, Aharon and his sons are Kohanim. So what I would like to do is go through this word Kohen. Where does it come from in Torah? Just in terms of where do we find this, that Aharon is suddenly the Kohen? Was he supposed to be the Kohen Gadol? Were we supposed to be Kohanim? Where does this all come from? So we'll do a little bit of a run through history from the beginning of time, essential, very close to the beginning of time, till now, the giving of the Torah, till the inauguration or the naming of Aaron and his sons as the Kohanim, to see just where the Torah talks about Kohanim. And then what I'd like to do is just discuss, I was going to say what's so special about Kohanim, but what did Hashem, what's the flip side of it, what are the rights, duties, responsibilities of Kohanim, and what do they get in compensation for that? Because the Kohanim were employed, Levim as well, were employed to work in Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash. They weren't working regularly generally, and so what did they get? So we'll work through all of that. So let's start with Parshas Well, we started with Tetzaveh, this week's Parsha. Let's just go to Parsha's Kisisa, which is next week's Parsha, because in next week's Parsha, we had the incident of the golden calf. Next week's going to be Erev Purim. Purim is next week, Monday night. And so I don't know how much of the Parsha we'll discuss. If we'll discuss the Parsha, we'll discuss Purim itself. We'll hopefully do both. But just in terms of the golden calf, Moshe is up on Har Sinai, receiving the mitzvahs, receiving the whole Torah from Hashem. Hashem sends him down after 40 days and 40 nights, and the Jewish people are there dancing around this golden calf, and they're saying, oh, this is your God, Jewish people. And he comes down and smashes the tablets, as we all know, and Aharon seems to be involved in the process of making the golden calf. And Moshe comes down and he says, what is going on? And Aharon says, look, the people forced me to do this. Essentially what happened was the Yetzirah, the Satan, came in the way and showed them a depiction of Moshe's lying on his deathbed or having died. And they said, oh, Moshe's not coming back, we need a replacement. The golden calf was their way of having an intermediary between them and Hashem, essentially. It was brought about essentially by the Erev Rav, and we see this in verses through the Torah. Most of the time, for virtually every time we had problems, except for individual problems, it was brought about by the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav was a group of people that Moshe said to Hashem, all these people want to join us. And Hashem said, yep, those are your people. And you see that time and time again. Hashem says, yep, your people have done this. Negative influences on Bnei Israel, really. And so they caused most of the actual idol worship. But as what happens whenever there is a big protest and type things, people get sucked into it. And many people got sucked into it, and a number of people died. Now, in the aftermath of the whole golden calf, the top of my head from memory, 3,000 people died. Maybe it was 6. But we're talking about out of 3 million people, it was a very small amount of people that actually were punished for worshipping this golden calf. The rest of the people might have been dancing and doing things. But Aharon seemed to be a little bit implicated. And Hashem says, let's just slow down a bit. So Moshe comes down and he says, we need to stop this. We need to stop this worship right now. And he comes down and he says, Vayomer, he says, Mi la Hashem alai. Who's for Hashem? And who jumped up? The Levim gathered around him. And they were told basically, take your swords and take out anybody who was involved with, neutralize, let's use that word, neutralize anybody who was involved with bowing down. And the Levim did as Moshe said. Oh, there you go, about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. And Moshe says, dedicate yourselves this day to Hashem. Each has opposed his son and his brother, and Hashem will bestow blessing upon you this day. At that point in time, the Kohanim are now selected. The Levim and the Kohanim did not get involved at all. They were the ones who did not get involved. The tribe of Levi didn't get involved in the slavery. They were the ones who were on the side. They weren't enslaved in Egypt. And here again, they were not involved in the golden calf, and they're the ones who jumped to Moshe's aid. And from this we see, okay, so the Levim are segregated, they're separated. And in fact, many times when we count the Jewish people based on number of tribes, there's always going to be 12 tribes. Sometimes Levi is counted as one of the tribes, and sometimes Yosef's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, are counted from the bracha from Yaakov as 2 tribes. And Levi is not included in those counts. And we counted many, many times in the desert, Parashat Bamidbar, we see about those countings. And so the Kohanim and the Levim at this point are now set aside. And until the end of time, Kohanim are treated differently and are supposed to behave differently. And for the same token, Levim are different to everybody else. Society is made up of, wherever we look and how we like it, there are people who, everybody's different. Everybody's got a different brain capacity. Everybody's got different skills. Everybody, and we need to recognize that we're not all the same. We all have differences. Our goal in life is to achieve the best we can achieve within ourselves and try and go beyond that. But the Kohanim were given this duty to minister to Hashem. The Levim were given the duty to assist the Kohanim, to be the choir in the Beis HaMikdash, to do various jobs around there, to house, to have the 48 cities of Levim where people could run to if they inadvertently killed, as we've discussed several times. Levim and Kohanim's job was to be teachers, as well as to do the service. I mean, a regular Kohen in temple times would go to the Beis HaMikdash 2 weeks a year. The service was done Shabbos to Shabbos. You would come in on a Shabbos, let's just say lunchtime, and the previous group would go out at lunchtime. That's when they would split the showbread, the lechem hapanim, from the table. Each of the two groups would get a portion of that bread. Those that were leaving would leave, and the new ones would start the service on Shabbos. And this went on, and there were 24 groups of Kohanim. King David set this up. So 24 times 2 is 48. That's pretty much once every 2 weeks. And then on the Shalosh Regalim, on the 3 Yom Tovs, many more Kohanim would come in because there was lots. But there was a group each Yom Tov that was there as their week. And that just moved through the year. So everyone got a turn at everything. The first place in the Torah that we meet a Kohen is where Avraham Avinu goes into the battle to save his nephew Lot. Lot has been involved in Sodom. He's living in Sodom, and there's a war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. One of the kings was the king of Sodom. The First World War. Avraham goes in with Eliezer, and they destroy the 4 kings. They win the war, and Avraham is taken to Melchizedek, king of Shalem. And it says about Melchizedek, Melech Shalem, Melchizedek, the king of Shalem, Hoitzi lechem v'yayin, he brought out bread and wine, Behu Kohen lekel elyon, he was the priest of the God of at the highest level. He was a priest of Hashem. So he was Melchizedek. Melchizedek came from a place called Shalem. Shalem sounds very much like Yerushalayim. And the commentators identify. Ramban says, Melchizedek, after meeting Avraham at the valley of Shaveh, the king of Sodom escorted him to Shalem, equals Yerushalayim, where they met Melchizedek. The sages identify Melchizedek as Shem, the son of Noach. So after the flood, Noach had 3 sons. His son Shem, who is our great-great-great-grandfather, Avram comes directly from Shem, straight line. He was called Melchizedek because he was Melech, Malki, of the future site of the temple, Tzedek, righteousness. As the most honored of Noach's children, Shem was made the priest of the Hashem in Yerushalayim. So Yerushalayim was already then known as the spiritual capital of the world. And that's the first time that we have a word Kohen in the Torah. Melchizedek was a Kohen, he was a priest to Hashem. And there we have it. The next few times we have the word Kohen in the book of Bereshis, in Genesis, and into the book of Shmos is all about non-Jewish priests. So the next time we have Yosef is brought out of jail, interprets Paro's dreams, and Paro says, you're going to be my prime minister, my viceroy. He says, I'm Paro, I'm going to rename you Tzafnas Paneach. And Paro says, I'm giving you Asnas, the daughter of Potipharah, as a wife. And who was this Potipharah? Kohen Oyen. He was Now, ArtScroll translates it as the chief of Oyen, as opposed to priest. But the word Kohen there comes in. He was the priest of this place called Oyen. I'm just looking at the notes here. And the commentaries bring that this Potipharah is identified as Potiphar, who was Yosef's first owner in Egypt. That we're also told that, although it's told here that this Asnas was a daughter of Potiphar, just as an aside, the commentaries bring that she was actually the daughter of Dinah. Dinah was raped by Shechem. She fell pregnant from that. And Yaakov sent this daughter away with an amulet. And when Yosef was given all these options of who to marry, he saw that she had this amulet written that she was from the house of Yaakov. And so Yosef married his niece. And she was actually a slave in Potiphar's house as well, or an adopted daughter perhaps. But that's a connection just as an aside there. The next time we have a priest mentioned is when Yosef is now dealing with the years of plenty and then the famine. The people come to him and they've got no food, and they bring him animals as payment for their food, and they bring him land, and all of these things are exchanged and go to Pharaoh's treasury. All the wealth of Egypt is basically owned by Pharaoh, except for, it says, Rak Admas HaKohanim, except for the land of the Kohanim, the priests. The Egyptian priests, Yosef did not buy the land, the Torah says, because they had a stipend from Pharaoh, and they lived off the stipend that Pharaoh gave them, therefore they didn't sell their land. So they were provided for by Pharaoh. Interestingly enough, right at the end of Parshas Vayigash, it says, Yosef imposed a statute till this day regarding the land of Egypt. It was Pharaoh's for the fifth. Only the priest's land alone did not become Pharaoh's. There Yosef set something up for perpetuity, that clergy are dealt with differently when it comes to tax. And if we look at Australian tax law right now, any member of the clergy working in whatever religion it might be, in Australian tax law does not pay fringe benefits tax. They pay regular tax on their income, but there's no fringe benefit tax. So most places will set up something, churches, mosques, shuls, I believe will try and set up something whereby their spiritual leaders will be paid in fringe benefits tax, therefore they don't have to pay tax because there's zero fringe benefits tax on fringe benefits for them, which I believe comes from what Yosef set up in Egypt. Okay, we come to the book of Shmois, and Moshe has killed the Egyptian. The Jewish people, Dasan and Aviram, are fighting, and they say, oh, you're going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian, and Moshe runs away. He knows Pharaoh's got a bounty on his, he runs away, and eventually he lands up at Yisro's place. And the Torah says that Moshe came to this place, or basically it just says straight away, Ulakoyin Midian, Sheva Banos, the minister of Midian had 7 daughters. They came and drew water from the well, troughs to water their father's sheep. The Kohen of Midian. We later identify him, he's called Reuel there, but we later identify him as Yisro. Yisro had 7 daughters. And Yisro had 7 names. Because each time he married off one of his daughters, he needs to take out a massive mortgage, and so he had to change his name. That was a joke. That's not true, but he did have 7 names. Yeah, but that's a Torah joke. Okay, and then you believe me. Believe the Torah. That's who you believe. Believe the rabbis if they're telling you Torah. Okay, so we hear about Yisro being the Kohen Midian. And that really ends it generally for Kohanim in the beginning of the Torah. From now on, we're going to talk about Jewish Kohanim. So in Parshas Yisro, when Yisro's come and the Torah is given, the Torah is about to be given in the introduction, just before the Torah lists Aseres HaDibros, Hashem tells Moshe, go down, warn the people not to come up on the mountain, warn them to stay below a certain level. And then it says, V'gam haKohanim hanigashim el Hashem yiskadshu pen yifrot bahem Hashem. Even the Kohanim who approach Hashem, be prepared, lest Hashem burst forth against them. Don't come too close to Hashem. Don't do the wrong thing. Because if you come too close to Hashem, in terms of seeing things you shouldn't see, going beyond a boundary, there's boundaries in life. Don't go beyond what you're supposed to do. And it says there, Gam HaKohanim, even the Kohanim. Now, we've learned now that Aharon and his sons were appointed only much later. So who are these Kohanim here? And so the commentators tell us, Rashi brings it over there, that these were the firstborn. The firstborn were supposed to be the Kohanim. And in most ancient civilizations, your priests were generally your firstborn. And so Rashi is saying, when it's talking about the Kohanim here, it's talking about the firstborn. But in terms of a chronology, according to most opinions, last week's Parsha, this week's Parsha, were really given only after the golden calf. Hashem didn't necessarily want to give us a Mishkan and a Beis HaMikdash. Hashem wanted to dwell directly with us. But he had to put this in place because of the sin of the golden calf, according to many commentators. And so these Parshas are out of order. The Kohanim should have been the firstborn. They should have been the one who served Hashem. But then we brought the golden calf. So Hashem said, no, we need to change tack. The firstborn did not deserve to be priests. So involved in the golden calf, they don't deserve it. We're going to build a Mishkan, and he gives us all of the things of the Mishkan because of the golden calf. And the Mishkan comes to atone for the sins of the golden calf and many other sins. And we're going to appoint Aaron and his sons because Aaron was such an incredible person, an incredible leader. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, who was Aaron? What was Aaron? Aaron was someone who was Ohev Shalom v'Roedev Shalom. He loved peace and he chased after peace. And the Mishnah goes on and says, what did Aaron do? Aaron loved everybody, and Aaron brought people closer to Hashem. For those traits alone and that practice that he did, he deserved to be the Kohen. And that's the Kohen's job. The Kohen's job is to go out there and help people. The way that Chazal described what Aaron did was he'd find out that two people were not getting along so well. He'd go to the one and he'd say, Chaim, your friend Shmerel, he really wants to make up with you. I think it's in your interest if you go and make up with Shmerel. And he'd go to Shmerel and say, Shmerel, Chaim really wants to make up with you. And he'd tell them both a bit of a story about how the other one wanted to make up, and the two of them would get together and Aaron would walk arm in arm with the three. The three of them would walk arm in arm. That was Aaron. That's what he did. He was able to bring people close together. He was, I guess, the first psychologist in history. He was able to see people as they really were and bring them together. And then the Mishnah ends, bring them close to Hashem. And no, that was Moshe. But he stopped stuttering at the giving of the Torah. Stutter, speech impediment, whatever it was, he burnt his mouth with coals from... There was a whole thing with Moshe and Paro. When Moshe was a baby in Paro's palace, the Paro's ministers were very concerned that Moshe is going to try and usurp the throne and take over from Paro's son because he was Paro's stepson or step-grandson. And so or adopted grandson, I guess. And so they put a test out, and they put a bowl of glowing coals and a bowl of gold. And they said, if he goes to the gold, that's what he's after. This kid just wants to take the gold. If he goes to the coals, then he's like just a normal kid who sees these bright, shiny things and he's going for it. And Moshe was incredibly intelligent, incredibly invested. His name was Tuvia from his parents because when he came into the world, the whole room lit up. Tuvia means it was good. It was goodness of Hashem. And the whole room lit up from his incredible light. And so he was at an amazing level from the moment he was born. And so he went to reach the gold. And it says one of the angels came and moved his arm and he touched the coal. He picked up the coal and touched his mouth, burnt his mouth, and that's why they say, the Torah says he had a speech impediment. It says also at the giving of the Torah, if you're talking about Parshas Yisro, that everybody was healed. The lame were healed, the blind were healed, the deaf were healed. Everybody who received the Torah was completely healed. Any ailments they had were gone. And so from that point on, we don't hear about Moshe with a speech impediment again. And so that's really all about who are Kohanim. The question is, what are Kohanim? What are Kohanim supposed to do? Now, obviously, we've discussed in the Beis HaMikdash, the Kohanim are supposed to serve in the temple. They're supposed to do the daily offerings. They're supposed to people bring an offering. The Kohanim are responsible for bringing the offering on behalf of people. People donate an animal to Hashem, to the Beis HaMikdash, or people commit a sin, an avera that's inadvertent, that requires a sin offering. They have to bring their animal or their bird or their meal offering, and it's offered up by the Kohanim. The Kohanim are the only ones who are allowed to be in the sanctified part of Beis HaMikdash. And so that's the job of Kohanim. And as I said before, Levim and Kohanim are also there to teach the Jewish people. And Aharon, obviously, to counsel, help, bring people close to Hashem, make peace between man and his fellow man. So Parshas Emor means to speak. In the middle of Vayikra, in Leviticus says, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Emor el HaKohanim, b'nei Aharon. Hashem said to Moshe, say to the Kohanim, the children of Aharon, va'amarta lahem, and say to them, so it's three sayings, say, tell this over a number of times, l'nefesh lo yitama ba'amav. Don't contaminate yourself to a dead person. A Kohen, and we know today, you go to a cemetery and there's signs up, Kohanim don't go here. In Melbourne today, we can go into the Ohel in both the cemeteries because they've been designed that Kohanim can go in. But in many places, a Kohen has to stand on the outside. But behind a funeral, Kohanim don't walk to the funeral, don't go to the gravesite. It then says, except for 7 relatives, those who are closest to the Kohen, he can come tamei meaning spiritually, ritually impure. When we come in contact with a dead person, that's the highest level of ritual impurity. And the only way we can get out of that is having the red heifer, the paraduma, which we're going to read Parshas Para in a few weeks' time before Pesach, where we have a pure red heifer, which is burnt, and the ashes are sprinkled on an impure person on the 3rd and 7th day. That's the only way we can come pure from it. Every person in the world outside of Israel is considered totally spiritually impure, whether we come in contact with the body or not. And today in Israel, there's so many graves that we've got no idea where they are, that we are all considered ritually impure. Even a Kohen who has protected himself, I'll come back to it in a moment, his whole life is still considered ritually impure, at best on a rabbinic level. But most of us have inadvertently or intentionally come in contact with the dead. So the 7 relatives a person is allowed to come, if they pass away, they're allowed to attend to their funeral needs, are mother, father, son, daughter, brother, and a sister who's never been married, and his wife. Those 7 people a Kohen can come close to, others they can't. However, if there's something called a Meis Mitzvah, if there's a person who has not got anyone to bury them, a Kohen then can go in. And then a Kohen, one of the practices in times gone by was people used to rip their hair out in mourning. And the Torah there says the Kohen should not make a bald spot on their head or shave the edge of beard. We're not allowed to shave, as in with a razor. There are ways of shaving. Not to cut our flesh. And that applies to all Jewish people, not only Kohanim. So, they shall not desecrate the name of Hashem. They bring his fire offerings, which are the food of Hashem, so to speak. They need to remain holy. A Kohen is not allowed to marry a woman who is described as a zoina, which is a harlot, or a divorcee, because a Kohen is holy to Hashem. Kohanim are sanctified, their food is sanctified, and then it talks about a Kohen Gadol. A Kohen Gadol is at a higher level. A Kohen Gadol is only allowed to, he is one who is anointed with oil and inaugurated, and he wears the vestments. In the second temple, they were inaugurated through the 8 garments that they wore, and he's not allowed to leave his head unshorn. He has to have a haircut regularly, he has to have very neat hair. He's not allowed to tear his garments even for a relative, and he's not allowed near any dead person. A Kohen Gadol can't even come tamei for a parent's funeral, or siblings or children. And he has to marry a virgin. A Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a woman who's been married before. Obviously, he can't marry a widow or divorcee. A regular Kohen can't marry a divorcee. Rabbinically, a Kohen is not allowed to marry a woman who has done chalitza, so a woman who's lost her husband, gone through chalitza with the brother, so she's released. It's a form of divorce, And so rabbinically, a Kohen's not even allowed to marry a chalutza who's gone through that process. What happens with a Kohen who does marry a divorcee is, or any woman that is not allowed to marry, their children are called chalalim. That person, that Kohen, loses his rights as a Kohen, and his children lose their, are never Kohanim, they're not Kohanim at all, and his daughters are not allowed to marry a Kohen, and his sons will not be Kohanim, and that's in perpetuity, it's forever. Interestingly enough, there is a gene on our DNA that known as the Aaronic gene, the Kohen gene, and the numbers vary, but the last time I looked, it's something like 93 or 94% of people, men who have a tradition that they're Kohanim, so it was passed down from father to son, that they're Kohen, have this gene. And virtually nobody else in the Jewish world has this gene. Wow. Now, that doesn't prove that the person's a Kohen. It just proves that their father told them they're a Kohen, and therefore it's a connection. Because if anybody married a divorcee along the way, that gene will probably carry through, and so those chalalim would be included. However, I believe that Hashem does this, and it's going to be a way, maybe, that Hashem's going to say, yep, these are my Kohanim. These are the people. If you've got that gene, you've got that pure lineage. I've got no basis that I'm standing on that, but I think that why would we, so many people who say the Kohanim still have that? So let me just show you quickly from a sefer that I've got called Big Day Kohuna, the priestly garments, just what the garments of the Kohen Gadol and a regular Kohen wore.
I'll ask you something. How often did they have to wear it? They have to wear it all the time?
Oh, okay, I'll show you now. Okay. So this was according to Rashi on this side, and according to Rambam on this side, what the Kohen Gadol wore. So you can see they're very similar. There's just differences in the ephod at the back here. Rashi's was much longer, but you can see it's a reverse apron. That's the Choshen Mishpat there, the breastplate with the 12 stones. You can see he is wearing tefillin. In times gone by, people wore tefillin all day, during the daytime only. In our times in Yerushalayim, there are a group of people that do wear tefillin all day. We generally don't, because in order to keep tefillin on your body has to be clean. So you can't pass wind, for example. You can't fall asleep wearing tefillin. So somebody's going to doze off. And so we for many, hundreds of years, the rabbis have said we only wear tefillin during morning prayer service. But in those days, they did wear tefillin all day. That there is the tzitz, the golden headband with Hashem's name on it, Kodesh Hashem. And there you can see at the bottom the bells and pomegranates. I'll pass this around so you can have a look. On the next page, this is just the white garments that the Kohen Gadol wore on Yom Kippur when he went into the Holy of Holies. And yes, it's a kittel, it's very similar. The difference is this is very fancy. A kittel is just generally plain cotton. But you can see, if you have a look at pictures when I pass it around, the box-like knit on the fabric. And then finally, that's what your regular Kohen wore. The 4 white garments. You can only see 3 of them there. You can't see his pants, obviously. But a long coat, a belt, a hat, and pants underneath. And again, he's wearing tefillin. And this year, Rambam and Rashi just have different understandings of what the belt looked like, essentially, and what the hat looked like. It's just a way of understanding it based on Chazal. So I'll pass this around. It's just the first 3 pages there you can turn over and have a closer look. I will mark the page just to make it just a little bit clearer. I've just put this marking in here just to show the me'il, the blue garment, and you can see the bells and pomegranates on the bottom of it. Okay, so the first 3 pages up front, and then that page with the green marker, you can have a look as we carry on. I'll just mark that. All right, am I going left or right? Huh? Left or right? Jew always goes right.
To the middle.
No, Jew always goes to the right. If in doubt, go to the right. It's a rule of law. If you're not sure which way to go, turn right. It's not really a law, it's just a custom. All right, let's... The right is your stronger side, always. Yeah, okay. Left-handed people, their left is their right, according to many halachas. Okay, so I have another book here called the Kohen's Handbook. Being a Kohen, you have to have these kind of svarim. And I've got a few others here about Birkas Kohanim, but we won't go through the Birkas Kohanim much now. But I just want to read the introduction. Most of this book is about coming in contact with the dead. Most of this book, it's 160 odd pages, and most of it's about what to do and what not to do. Now, just in terms of coming in contact with it, I went through passages Emor, and it says Emor 3 times. Rashi learns there, say it to the Kohanim and teach it to their children. Even young children who are Kohanim, we need to instill in them this issue of you are Kohanim, you're at a spiritual level that you have to keep sanctified, and therefore you need to make sure you don't come in contact with the dead. We train our children that, you don't just run into a hospital. You go to a hospital to visit people if you need to. But a Kohen in Israel, in many of the hospitals, they have signs up to say whether Kohanim are allowed in or not. If a person has passed away in the hospital, there is ritual impurity potentially in the whole building, therefore Kohen can't go in. There were issues several years ago with flying to Israel, because many of the flights were going on the Cholon over the Cholon cemetery. And there's a problem with Tumah, because Tumah goes straight up. There's an issue with Kohanim getting on a plane if there is a body being transported to Israel. So there's less of an issue from this part of the world because there's not many Kohanim. But out of New York, there are certain flights that El says will not have a body on them. I'm in a Kohen WhatsApp group, and in there a few weeks ago there's a message, LY, whatever the flight number was, is not supposed to have a body. I've just heard there's a body on this flight. And so, but El Al have set up protocols from various places whereby you know which flights are going to potentially have a body and which don't. And there's laws in terms of when we have to investigate whether we can go on a plane or not, depending where you're flying from. Kohanim have to be aware of this. At the time when the Cholon cemetery was an issue, there were certain flights I was told I'm not allowed to catch coming in from Bangkok. And so these issues are with us day in and day out. Okay, so I'm just going to read a little bit from the introduction of this Kohen's Handbook by Rabbi Yochanan Alexander Lombard. How the status of a Kohen is transmitted through the generations. Immediately after Jewish people received the Torah and built the Mishkan, Aharon and his sons were singled out to be Kohanim. Elevated above their fellow Jews, they were designated as spiritual leaders of the people. To enable them to fulfill their mission, they were guaranteed an income from tithes and other gifts, I'll go through a little bit of that in a moment, given to the Kohen by the rest of the nation. As part of their special function, as role models and spiritual leaders, the Kohanim were enjoined to maintain an enhanced degree of purity and sanctity. Aharon and his sons were anointed to become Kohanim. Ever since their special status, including all privileges and obligations, has been passed down automatically from father to son. A Kohen is expected to be exemplary in his mitzvah observance, particularly scrupulous in his observance of the extra mitzvahs given due to his elevated rank. Throughout the generation, the Kohen has toiled to be found worthy of the honor allotted to him as Hashem's special servant. So long as he preserves his unique status, every Jew is commanded to honor him and acknowledge his lofty position. Why was Aharon chosen? Aharon possessed exceptional qualities that made him worthy of being chosen as father of all future Kohanim. Most outstanding was his capacity to feel genuine joy at another person's success. This was revealed when his younger brother Moshe was chosen to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt. At first, Moshe declined the task out of fear that Aharon might feel slighted. Aharon was the leader of the Jewish people in Egypt at the time. Hashem then told Moshe that his brother Aharon was already on the way to meet him and was happy to see his younger brother's greatness. Our sages tell us that for this act, which shows outstanding generosity of spirit, Aharon merited receiving the special mitzvah of blessing the Jewish people. King Solomon said, Toiv ayin hu yivarech, a generous person should be the one to dispense blessings. For blessings to flow unhindered, generosity of spirit is essential. Till this day, only a Kohen has the privilege of participating in Birkas Kohanim, the priestly blessing given during services. In addition, due to his pure, unselfish heart, Aharon also merited to wear the Urim V'Tumim, which we discussed, which were placed in the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. The Urim V'Tumim enabled the 12 jewels of the Choshen to light up, providing answers to the questions asked to the Kohen Gadol. And then discusses Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which I discussed. Additional quality, Aharon loved peace, pursued peace. He loved people and brought them close to Torah. Aharon taught us how to bring out the best in people, and this is one of the foundations of sanctity. Man was created to reach out, to connect, and to want the best for others. On his own, man is selfish and self-seeking, but when he opens his heart and builds relationships, he becomes sanctified, he becomes Kodesh. That's why the Kohanim were elevated.
Rabbi times they used to give a special lesson to the children who were having bar mitzvah.
Yep.
On your job and your role
As a Kohen. There you go. Okay. So there are 24 gifts given to Kohanim. Not all of them are given in our times, but I'll just run through these very, very quickly. Some gifts are given outside the Beis HaMikdash and will happen not to do with the Beis HaMikdash itself, but just generally. So, Truma is the first part given of all produce given to a Kohen. The Torah doesn't describe how much, but an average person will give 2%, between 1.5% and 3% or thereabouts of produce goes to Kohen. Then there's Trumas Meister. Levi gets 10%, and he needs to give 10% of that to the Kohen. That's given to a Kohen. We don't give Truma and Meister today. We take it off, but we don't give it because Truma has to be eaten in sanctity. And we are, as I said, we're all spiritually, ritually impure. Then we have challah. We call challah challah because to remind us what challah really is. The challah we eat is the leftover part that we can eat. What we give to a Kohen is a small part of it, which is actually called challah. Today we still take challah, but we don't eat it. People either burn it or discard it in a nice way. Then there's certain parts of the animal that are given to the Kohen: the foreleg, the jaws, and one of the stomachs, the keva. In many places, that's still actively done. What a lot of butchers will do is they will find a Kohen, maybe like a relative, and they will give it to him, and he can sell it back to the butcher. So he's not given all of it, and so it is given. It's symbolic. Pigeon aben, a firstborn, because the firstborn was supposed to be the Kohanim. They have some level of sanctity, and they need to be redeemed. So the father has to come and buy him back from the Kohen for 5 silver coins. The Kohen is allowed to actually keep those 5 silver coins. Many Kohanim will just give it back, but you're not allowed. The father can't know that he's getting it back because then he's not giving it with a full heart. He's not buying his son fully. So, but
they can't give it to charity or something.
do what you do with it. Then consecrated property, certain property that is consecrated, is given to Kohanim. The Kohanim had ancestral fields in Israel. Please God, we should all get that back. And then there's various other different pieces that are given outside the Beis HaMikdash. In the Beis HaMikdash itself, the first fruits, Bikurim, were brought, and the Kohanim were allowed to eat those first fruits. Of the 7 species of Israel, the Bikurim were given. A firstborn animal that was of a animal that could be brought as a sacrifice, sheep, goat, and cattle, were brought to the Beis HaMikdash as an offering, and the Kohanim were allowed to eat that. Pigeon of a firstborn, we said. And then a donkey, firstborn donkey, needs to be redeemed with a firstborn sheep, and that's the Kohen is involved in that. And that's very much can be done today. And we have had one in Melbourne some years ago. And then, dependent very much on the Beis HaMikdash, all of these are no longer, at this point in time, not happening, but the Kohen is given various different parts of different animals, including like the skin. So the Kohen was given the skin of the animal. They can then make leather from that and sell it and do what they need to do with that. And various parts of the animal that they could eat. So there are 24 gifts given to Kohanim. And this was practiced in those times. Some of those gifts have the status of being elevated, having kedusha, having holiness, and they could only be eaten by Kohanim and their family. Like Truma could only be eaten by Kohen and his family if they were in a state of purity. So they need to make sure that they were ritually pure at all times. If they had Truma in their house, they couldn't touch that Truma and they couldn't eat that Truma. And so that was something that happened all the time. So just to end off, originally the Kohanim were going to be the firstborn. Then we had the golden calf, just summarize all this. Then Aharon came along, and although he was involved in the golden calf, because of his other attributes and because of what he tried to do to delay it happening, the Gemara brings that, and we understand through that Hashem told Moshe to appoint Aharon and his sons as Kohanim. This was done by Hashem, and Kohanim were consecrated formally, and Kohanim were given the garments to wear so that people would know who the Kohanim were. These garments were only allowed to be worn in the temple during the Avodah. And so the Mishnah in Yuma describes how the Kohen Gadol would go through the service. As I said, throughout the day, he'd change from his 8 vestments into his Yom Kippur white ones several times. But the Mishnah ends off and says at the end of Yom Kippur, he would dress in his own clothing and go home and make a big party. And so they were only allowed to wear these garments in the Beis HaMikdash. There's only one, as far as I know, occurrence where a Kohen Gadol went out of the Beis HaMikdash in his priestly garments, and that was when Alexander of Macedon, they call him Alexander the Great, came to destroy Jerusalem. And he arrived, and Kohen Gadol went out to meet him, and he was dressed in his garments. And Alexander jumped off his horse. Gemara brings there. He jumped off his horse, and he bowed down to the Kohen Gadol. And they said to him, "What are you doing? You're the king of the world." And he said, No. I have a dream, and every night I dream about, every time I go into battle, I have this dream, and if I have the dream, this man comes to protect me and save me. I never knew who this person was dressed in these fancy garments. I've just seen him now. If I saw that dream, then I know I'm victorious in battle, and therefore he didn't conquer Jerusalem. Alexander didn't conquer Jerusalem, he moved on. Unfortunately, after he died not long after that. He was a very young man when he died. The influence of the Greeks and the Hellenists caused a lot of our problems in the second half of the Second Temple. The whole Hanukkah story is about the Hellenists who try to become more Greek than the Greeks. And that's probably most of our problem all the time. We try and become more whichever country we live in than everyone else, instead of trying to retain our identity. We are different. We're not special. We only become special when we behave in a special way. But we are different. And we need to know that difference. And so let's just end with this Shabbos is Parshas Zachor. As we said, next Shabbos is... next week is Purim. We've got Tanis Esther on Monday, the fast of Esther on Monday, and then Purim on Monday night and Tuesday. But before the Shabbos, before Purim, we always read what's called Parshas Zachor. According to many opinions, Parshas Zachor is a Torah obligation to hear the few verses of Zachor. Many people say it every single day as one after Shacharis, as one of the 6 remembrances. Some people have 10 things that they remember every day. The Torah says remember certain things. One of them is, a regular Ashkenaz Seder has 6. One of those things is Parshas Zachor, to remember what Amalek did to us. So who was this Amalek? Amalek was a grandson of Esav, just cousin of ours. And when we left Egypt and we'd come through the Yam Suf, and a few people started complaining, Amalek attacked. And the story there was Moshe raised his hands. Yehoshua went in. That's the first time we meet Joshua. He went in to lead as the general lead in the battle, and Moshe stood on the hill with Aaron and Hur at his side, and he raised his hands. And every time his hands were up, the Jewish people were victorious, and every time his hands were dropped from tiredness, there were problems, and the Amalek were winning the battle. And then Moshe sat on a rock, and Aaron and Hur held his hands up, and we were able to prevail over them. The Torah there says Amalek attacked you when you were weak, and therefore you need to be aware that this Amalek, that's what his job is in the world. His job is to come along whenever you're at a weak point and attack you. And we've seen that so many times. So I'm just going to go to the verses quickly. So we're going to read as the maftir this week, as the additional reading, Parshas Amalek, which is in the end of Parshas Kiseitze, right near the end of the Torah. The Torah says, and I'm going to read through the 3 verses, and I'll translate them. Zachor eis asher asa lecha Amalek b'derech b'tzeischem Mitzrayim. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you were leaving Egypt. Asher kocha b'derech v'yazanev b'cha kol hanechshalim acharecha v'ata ayef v'yageh v'lo yareh Elokim. That he happened upon you on the way. I'll come back to that word in a moment. And he struck those of you who were at the back, at the hindmost, and the weaklings at your rear, when you were faint and exhausted, and he did not fear Hashem. He didn't fear God, Elokim. V'haya baneach Hashem Elokecha lecha mikol oyevecha misaviv ba'aretz asher Hashem Elokecha nosen lecha nachala l'rishta timche et zecher Amalek mitachas hashemayim lo tishkach. It shall be that when Hashem your God gives you rest from your enemies all around, in the land that Hashem your God gives you as an inheritance to possess it, in other words, the land of Israel, you shall wipe out the memory of Amalek from under the heaven. You shall not forget. Wipe out what Amalek, his memory, and don't forget. That doesn't mean we go around with a shotgun or a dagger and stab anybody who thinks that they're Amalek. That's not our job. We need to remember what they did to us. We need to remember that Amalek attacked us when we were at our weakest point. And if we look at, it's interesting, the Gemara talks about Amalek. The Gemara was written 1,500 years ago. But it says, where's Amalek today? It says Amalek hu Germania. Whether that's Germany or not, we don't know. But maybe it is a bit of a prophecy in the Gemara saying, well, the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, were the people who, were they the actual descendants of Amalek? Maybe, maybe not. But did they take the form of Amalek? Absolutely. I think we can even say today that Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran are taking that thing, and they attack us when we're at our weakest. And that's what the Purim story is about. Haman Harasha, it says there he was an Amalekite. He was the great-great-great-grandson of Agag. Agag, it says Hagagi, was the king of Amalek. And King Shaul, the first Jewish king, was told to destroy Amalek, destroy Agag and all of the people. And Shaul decided that he was going to leave Agag alive for one night. And Shmuel the prophet came along and said, what have you done? The next morning he says, why have you left him alive? And Shaul brought his reason, and for that reason, that was one of the reasons why Shaul lost his throne. But Shmuel then took the life of Agag and thought that's it. But unfortunately, Agag was with a woman that night. She fell pregnant, and her great-great-grandson was Haman. And Haman comes along and he says, there's this people, they're scattered around the kingdom, they're different, they're not unified, they're all over the show. We need to wipe them out. When we're at our weakest point, that's what Amalek, that's what Haman, that's what those enemies of our people are. Those who take the guise of Amalek do. They try and attack us. It says, Asher kocha baderech, they cooled you down. They talk about what did Amalek do? The Jewish people had just gone through the desert. They'd just been taken out of Egypt. They'd gone through the Yam Suf Hashem. The world knew what had happened. All the waters in the world split. Everybody knew that Hashem had saved the Jewish people. The Jewish people were at this incredible high level, and then they started complaining. And so what did Amalek do? And everyone knew, and this is it. The Jewish people are Hashem's chosen people. You cannot attack them. Amalek came along, Kachamid to cool off. He came along. It says, direct translation, he happened upon it. But the commentators say he cooled it off. What happens if you've got a very hot bath? The first person who gets into that bath burns themselves. Amalek was wiped out. He burnt himself. But he cooled off the water. He made it possible that other people said, hang on, if he can attack them, so can we. And that's what he does. So Hamas came along on October 7th. We were at a very, very low point. There was so much infighting, and they attacked. And the rest of the world jumped on the bandwagon. Hamas came in. They've pretty much wiped themselves out. They've destroyed Gaza. But they've cooled it off that the rest of the world can say, oh, we can attack. We've got the ability to attack in the United Nations, in the rest of the world, in Bondi, and wherever it might be. They feel that they've got that power over us now. And the only way we can get rid of that power that they feel that over us is by being unified. And if we're unified, and if we show Hashem that we are one, that we are His children, then Hashem will stop all of this anti-Semitism, and He will bring Mashiach speedily in our days.
Amen.